Welcome to Twists of Life, where every story has an unexpected turn. Stories of joy and sorrow, hope and redemption, just like the life we all live. Make yourself comfortable. It's time to begin. Sarah shifted her shoulders impatiently and, exhaling deeply, stared out the window. The view outside, unfortunately, offered no solace. On the gray platform, glistening with puddles from the rain, the familiar station hustle and bustle unfolded, the inevitable prelude to the departure of a long-distance train. In these moments, life seems to compress, accelerating its rhythm. Movements become frantic, faces express a mixture of joy and apprehension, and the conductors display a particular degree of nervousness and dissatisfaction. In principle, they can be understood. Is it really so difficult for respectable citizen passengers to arrive at the station in good time? To approach their carriage in advance and calmly take their assigned seat? No. They absolutely must rush to board at the very last moment, so that 10 people can then shove and shout, waving their tickets, while simultaneously trying to squeeze into a narrow passage that is not easily conquered even alone. Look, for instance, at the lady in the clearly tight skirt agonizing over how to hoist her leg onto the step without risking either her clothing or her reputation. It's simply ridiculous. What an outfit to choose for a journey. And someone else, for whom the assault on the carriage is still to come, in the final seconds, particularly late, flies down the platform, losing bags, string bags, children, and their last ounce of strength along the way. Like, say, this man who is dragging two-wheeled suitcases with another huge bag perched on top of each. It's amazing how some people manage to take so much junk with them. Just like dung beetles or ants, capable of carrying a load exceeding their own weight. And it wouldn't be so bad if it were just belongings, but some people stock up on provisions as if this is their last chance to eat in their lives. Look at that small, plump woman quickly shuffling her feet, with her arms spread wide, clutching a dozen baguettes between them. Obviously, the lady fears not reaching her destination and dying of hunger on the way, although she looks as if she could survive for at least a year without any food at all, especially without bread, which, by the way, would only do her good. Oh, and who is this striding along with rare composure? Look at that type. Glasses on his nose, and in his hands such an enormous collection of crosswords that it's visible even from here. Well, I'll be an intellectual. He'll pretend to know absolutely everything about everything the whole journey, while constantly peeking at the back of the magazine for the answer. And if you're so smart, sir, why do you look at your ticket every 5 steps, and then raise your head to the carriage number sign? Surely your 2, or maybe even 3 diplomas don't help you simply remember one unfortunate digit and calmly look for it. Ah, all right. The composure has evaporated. He glanced at his watch, realized he was late, and also ran down the platform like a goose. And someone else, on the contrary, is frozen in place, battling the urge to bolt, not waiting for the train to finally depart. These are clearly people saying goodbye. Look, for example, the fussy thin fellow is hovering, having just strained himself helping a rather unattractive lady, about 3 times his size, into the carriage. The madam gave him a final, expressive, menacing look, and even thrust a fist under his nose for emphasis. The man's face shows clear relief and joy, which he is rather awkwardly masking as sorrow. He's probably gotten rid of his dearest wife, at least for a while, and is about to jump for joy right here on the platform. And here's another type of farewell sayer, so to speak, the romantic one. A girl, thin, pale, with smeared lipstick and clear traces of runny mascara on her cheeks. What do we have here? A real drama. I wonder who she's seeing off. Ah, that guy over there. There he is, sticking out of the carriage door, and the conductor, far from romantic, is apparently trying to shove him back in. Well, I'll be. Looks like lovers. How sweet, if you ignore the fact that the guy is clearly pleased. Look how happily he's waving his arms. He almost fell off the step. And the girl, on the contrary, is all sorrow. Obviously, she feels that nothing good will come of this parting for her personally. Yes, my dear girl, yes. Your boy will leave for the capital now, and you'll never see him again. Suddenly Sarah started, as if waking up, and listened to her own thoughts with bewilderment. What was happening to her? Where did this biting irony come from? This almost malice towards complete strangers who had done nothing wrong to her? Why was she, standing by the carriage window, exuding an almost palpable irritation? After all, she had never been like this. What kind of absurd, and most importantly, malicious images were swirling in her head? But perhaps everything was entirely different. Perhaps the person with the enormous luggage is the father of a large family, and when divided among each member, it's just one bag or suitcase per person, a perfectly normal occurrence. And now, instead of a greedy peddler, she sees a man bravely carrying the burden of his entire family. Who does he have there? Perhaps 5 children are waiting for him on the berths in the compartment. And the plump lady with the baguettes? Perhaps a caring mother bringing a couple of snacks for her children. And the intellectual man with the crossword, in reality, an outstanding erudite. And not only does he not peek at the answers, but on the contrary, he himself composes these puzzles. And with the farewell sayers, everything could be completely different. The guy and the girl truly love each other, and she is crying not from suspicion and bad premonitions, but from separation. And he is simply a cheerful person who expresses his sadness by smiling. He went away on business, and when he returns, they will get married, and everything will be very good for them. And the lady in the tight skirt? Well done. Smiling shyly, she waved her hand, slightly adjusted the fabric, and skillfully climbed into the carriage, eliciting a wave of approving glances from both those seeing people off and the men waiting to board. Indeed, a train journey is no reason to dress in shapeless clothes. A woman has the right to remain a woman if her soul demands makeup, a skirt, and heels. A long-distance carriage is no obstacle to that at all. And even that skinny fellow, maybe he's just happy that he managed to stuff his immense wife into the carriage, because she could easily not have fit through the door. Although no, with that skinny fellow, it seems her initial suspicions are probably correct. He's shifting his weight from foot to foot far too impatiently. He clearly has more pleasant plans in store, and he has no intention of wasting a single minute of his free time. Feeling herself being carried away again, and the smile on her face about to turn into a sarcastic grimace, Sarah stepped away from the window. No, this was not normal. She needed to get a grip on herself and not turn into a wicked fury. She returned to her compartment and sat down in her seat. The reason for this outburst of irritation was, in essence, simple and understandable. Sarah hated trains and everything associated with them with all her soul. The mere thought that instead of a comfortable 4 hours of sleep in an airplane seat, she would have to spend 3 days in a carriage, 2 nights and 3 days, constantly changing her body position, getting up, sitting down, trying to lie down, if of course she even dared attempt this feat, exhausted her to the limit. Such a long journey frankly frightened her, and she could not shake off the absurd but persistent fantasy that, entering the carriage as a relatively young woman, she would emerge from it a gray-haired and trembling old woman. This long train journey was not a whim, but a harsh necessity, the only way to get home in the near future. Sarah Elizabeth Ashton, a financial auditor for a large holding company, was on a business trip to one of the most remote enterprises. The deadlines for the audit, initiated by management, were vague, and Sarah was not in a hurry to buy a return ticket, believing she could buy one at any moment. Imagine her astonishment when, instead of the usual airline ticket, she was handed some strange voucher. "What is this?" she asked, bewildered. It's a train ticket, the girl from the factory secretariat announced with a beaming face. You know what? Sarah exclaimed indignantly. You must be joking. Take this back. I'm not going by train. Well, fine. The impudent girl nodded. In that case, Sarah Elizabeth, you're staying with us for an indefinite period. About a month and a half, no less. Understand? Seeing that Sarah was about to explode, the secretary decided to explain. This isn't a capital city airport. We only have 2 flights a week, and tickets sell out a month, sometimes 2, in advance, especially now during the holiday season. So what? Why should that concern me? Your job is to get me a ticket. Please be kind enough to do so. I don't care how you do it. I need to fly out the day after tomorrow, 2 days from now at the latest. I need to be back by Wednesday. Exactly. I've done my job. You're provided with a ticket. You leave by train tomorrow morning and will be in Moscow on Wednesday. The girl, apparently, was absolutely confident in her righteousness and looked at Sarah defiantly. It became clear that further arguing was pointless. Sarah literally snatched the ticket from her fingers and grabbed her phone. Hello, airline ticket office, she said into the receiver. I need a ticket for tomorrow's flight. You know, so do I, came the reply. Outrageous, Sarah articulated clearly, looking at the snickering person on the other end, and hung up. The romance of the road with groves and fields flashing past the window, with wires and poles racing alongside the train, evoked not the slightest enthusiasm in her. No tears of tenderness welled up from the beauty and vastness of the Russian expanses, no urge to recite poetry. On the contrary, the rapid change of scenery outside the window caused slight nausea. The beloved clatter of the wheels did not lull her to sleep, but only increased her irritation. The food that passengers so love to brighten their long journey with would not go down, causing sensations similar to seasickness. Normal sleep was only possible for her under 3 strict conditions: complete darkness, absolute silence, and absolute stillness. It's not hard to guess that under such conditions, sleep on a train was out of the question. How can you possibly sleep when everything is shaking, creaking, rattling, flashing with reflections of light, and talking in different voices? And oh yes, the most important thing, the notorious carriage socializing, which for some reason is considered almost a sacred duty. As if the very fact of being in a confined space turns strangers into almost relatives and like-minded people on all issues, from growing potatoes to gas prices. And if someone doesn't want to participate in these endless debates, they are immediately labeled as unpleasant and suspicious individuals. Such outcasts are given expressive glances, and eventually the person with no interests is forced to shamefully leave the compartment so as not to interfere with normal people discussing vitally important topics. In short, the entire atmosphere of the train was deeply alien and unpleasant to Sarah. All right, never mind. I'll just sit as long as I can. I'll think about my own things. Maybe read? Take a nap. I'll survive somehow. She finally reconciled herself to the inevitable, listening to those very wheels, now clattering over the points as the train started moving. Her compartment neighbors seemed normal. At least for now they were quiet and hadn't taken out cutlets from their bags. And then her resignation was once again threatened. What threat? It was simply ruthlessly destroyed. Oh, my dear, I see you have the Amateur Gardener magazine. Are you interested in tomatoes, dear? Oh, wonderful. Tell me, darling, have you tried planting the Moscow ultra-early tomato? Came the words of the lower berth neighbor, addressed to another passenger. The lively elderly woman was happily examining the younger, more energetic lady. At least, the upper berth didn't bother her in the least. Oh, wait! The owner of the upper berth deftly slid down and stared at the old woman with admiration. What did you say? Moscow ultra-early? No, I don't even know that one. I always plant the Ural one. It's early, too. Oh, what are you saying? That's the last century. The native of, at least, the first half of that very last century, and closer to its beginning, declared authoritatively. There's a wonderful variety. Early Moscow. You must try it. It's absolutely amazing. I planted in May directly in open ground. And most importantly, it absolutely doesn't need to be pinched. Oh, really? Her interlocutor exclaimed, and even pressed her hands together in silent rapture. Yes, yes. And its tops are so wonderful, fragrant, so bright. It's a pity you can't give them to the piglets, but mine happily gobble up the carrot tops too, although some clever people also say, you can't. The elderly woman continued to unfold the picture of her hobbies before her admiring interlocutor. Oh, you should listen less to everyone. What do they know? The other woman actively agreed. Nothing will happen. I, by the way, like fresh tops myself. In salads, in soup, and you can chew on them as they are. Oh, and do you know how they help with joints? Really? The specialist in growing unpinched tomatoes was interested. Uh-huh, exclaimed the lover of tops. So here's how. You take a couple of the fluffiest carrot tops, chop them up, brew them with boiling water, and then… Sarah slid off her seat and, feeling glances full of pity on her back, left the compartment. The day was drawing to a close. The sun, hanging exactly on the side Sarah was looking at from the carriage window, was sinking towards the horizon, bathing everything in a pinkish golden light and casting reflections on the glass. It was very beautiful, and even a nature as thick-skinned as Sarah Ashton, according to her mother, felt this beauty. When romanticism and enthusiasm were being handed out, our Sarah was pushing her way to the front rows in the queue for intelligence and persistence, her mother would chuckle, hinting at her daughter's not-so-girlish character. Sarah did indeed very rarely admire landscapes, still lifes, and other picturesque combinations. But this time, perhaps because there was nothing else to do, and for the first time in many days, or maybe years, she was simply standing idle with no particular thoughts. She sincerely admired the summer sunset, its crimson golden rays piercing the entire space between the horizon and the moving carriage. Beautiful, Sarah breathed out in admiration, and apparently she had done it aloud, because nearby there was a similar sigh, as if in response, and a man's voice. Indeed, Sarah Elizabeth, it's very beautiful. I just never would have guessed you paid attention to such things. Sarah started in surprise, and didn't immediately realize she had been addressed by her full name and patronymic, and when she recognized the voice, she just shook her head. If there was anything she lacked to finally and irrevocably hate carriage life, it was the presence of this person here. Honestly, she would have preferred to stay in her compartment, listen to her neighbors' gossip, and perhaps even become imbued with the ideas of folk medicine and gardening values. In any case, she had a better chance of that than of having a normal conversation with the man who had suddenly ruined her enjoyment of the sunset. She raised her head and squinted. Well, I'll be, David Michael, she exclaimed, rather unconvincingly feigning joy. What a pleasant surprise. Is that you? Yep, it's me, he confirmed, also cheerfully. But unlike her, he seemed sincere. Imagine, what an unexpected meeting. I was standing here looking, and I couldn't believe my eyes. I even rubbed them. Holy cow, I thought. It's Sarah Elizabeth herself in person. It's not Sally. It's Sarah, she hissed through clenched teeth. I've told you 1,000 times. Don't butcher my name with some silly rural accent. Save your boisterous simplicity for gullible girls. Yes. Oh, don't be offended. I didn't invent it. That's what they nicknamed you at our factory. Our Sarah the artisan. You wove such intricate lace there in 2 weeks. Now the whole management team is sitting around wondering how we're going to untangle ourselves. He spoke with a serious expression, but his eyes were openly laughing. You're lying about everything, Sarah suddenly declared. As if I don't know that all the silly and, by the way, Not at all funny jokes circulating at the factory are your doing. All this nastiness comes from you. And as for the business, you know, you shouldn't have entangled. That is, let things get so out of hand. Then the whole management team wouldn't have to be sitting around now. By the way, maybe someone else will end up sitting there too. Well, in the literal sense, for real. For negligence in reporting, Sarah flared up. And personally, if I were you, esteemed David Michael, I wouldn't be so calm and self-assured. After all, the chief engineer isn't the last person at the factory. So, in short, I don't want to talk to you, especially about such topics. And generally, I find it unpleasant to see you. The thought that this pleasure will last 2 days makes me shiver. So, on the contrary, this is a hellishly unpleasant unpleasantness. That's it. I wish you success. She turned her back to the man and rushed towards her compartment. And suddenly she stopped, as if hitting an invisible wall, and couldn't believe her ears. There was quiet laughter behind her. She turned around in astonishment. He was indeed laughing. And suddenly Sarah caught herself thinking that she hadn't seen anything more attractive in a long time, unless, of course, you counted today's sunset. Despite all his awful mannerisms, strange sense of humor, and monstrous, inexplicably based self-confidence, he, David Michael Thompson, was good-looking. Just good-looking. And that was that. And to deny it was as foolish as claiming that the sun was rising at this moment, not setting. Now, when he wasn't wearing a grimy work uniform, his clean-shaven cheeks shone, and there wasn't a routine smeared spot of machine oil on his forehead or nose, it was especially noticeable. His rather fine, regular features did not make him effeminate. On the contrary, it was 100% masculinity, only beautiful. But the main adornment of his face was his eyes, light gray, transparent, framed by dark eyelashes, combined with dark hair, a high forehead, white teeth, and an excellent physique. It altogether was very striking. And the most amazing thing was that the owner of all this external wealth was completely natural and seemed to say to everyone around him with his whole appearance, "Well, yes, I'm good-looking, I know, but it's not my fault I was born this way. Although, to be honest, I'm not complaining. If I've offended anyone by this, I apologize, but generally speaking, it's nonsense. So, what were we going to talk about?" But despite all his attractiveness, Sarah couldn't stand him. She had gotten to know Thompson quite well during the 2 weeks she spent at the factory. She acknowledged his merits, at least some of them, and why hide it? She even owed him her salvation in the literal sense of the word. And yet she couldn't help herself. He was deeply unpleasant to her. But sometimes it happens that people are simply unpleasant to each other for no objective reason, without explanation, on the level of feelings and emotions. That was exactly how it was for her, for Sarah, towards the factory's chief engineer, Thompson. And it seemed the antipathy was mutual. At least, he never missed an opportunity to tease her, often quite painfully. In short, her relationship with Thompson was difficult and not particularly pleasant. And this was all the more frightening because he was, undoubtedly, interesting, handsome, brave, decisive, intelligent. And there was something else, something she couldn't articulate, but only vaguely felt. And this something was unsettling, interfering with her life. Because of this, she was even angrier at Thompson. He was even more repulsive because of all this. It's like some kind of nastiness in an alluringly beautiful package, she thought angrily, flopping down in her seat and startling her neighbors, who even interrupted their discussion of composting or mulching. For Sarah, however, it was all the same. "What's wrong, dearie?" asked the older woman, looking at Sarah with concern. "You have spots all over your face." "Just wait. I'll pour you some tea from the thermos with chamomile and honey. It's very calming. Maybe you need anything else?" "Yes," Sarah nodded. "Like, could you help me throw someone out of the carriage? He's hanging around, you see, some half-baked Alain Delon. Oh, are you talking about Davy, dear? The old woman suddenly reacted completely unexpectedly. And it's true. He does look like Fanfan La Tulipe, just a bit older. Yes, a bit sturdier, a bit more solid. And how did I not figure it out myself? About Davy? Sarah repeated, astonished. Do you know him? Well, how do I know him? The woman smiled. We met at the station while he was helping me out. You see, we haven't even introduced ourselves yet, and we're traveling together for 2 days. What are your names, dears? Sarah, she mumbled, trying to put on a pleasant expression. It's easy to be silent when you don't know anyone. You're not really obligated to socialize. But now you have to. Introductions have been made, and a compartment acquaintance is almost like family, at least for the duration of the journey. Sarah, wonderful. My name is Edith Mary, and this is Carol. The old woman nodded towards her tomato-minded companion. So who are we talking about? About David. Her face broke into a smile. He helped me so much with my suitcase, bless his heart. He dragged it and me along to the carriage, shoved us in. So I'm traveling thanks to him. Otherwise I'd still be sitting on my trunk in the station square. Big deal, a savior. Just a normal manly act, Sarah grumbled. He's still a boor. Davy a boor? Edith Mary was surprised. What are you saying, Sarah? He's a wonderful person. Oh, really? How long have you known him? A couple of hours. And I've had that pleasure for 2 weeks now, so I know better, Sarah declared. Oh, Sarah, do you really need time for that? You can see such people right away, at first glance, with your heart. He's a wonderful person, Edith declared. All right, Edith Mary. I won't argue with you. Sarah waved her hand and lay down on her berth. Well, I'll be. What a cherub, a savior of old ladies. Siberian Fanfan. He's not Fanfan at all. He's a fanfaron, braggart. Oh, forget him. As if she has nothing else to worry about. She herself, by the way, has hell knows what going on in her life. But deciding not to think about Thompson was much easier than actually not doing it. Her thoughts returned again and again to this man, who was completely unlike anyone she had met in her 35 years of life, and who suddenly, by a strange whim of fate, was right nearby, literally behind the thin partition of the compartment. At the factory, located in a small Siberian town 3,000 kilometers from the capital, Sarah found herself by order of the head of their huge holding company, which united more than one such enterprise under its wing. Arthur James was Sarah's patron in the literal and figurative sense of the word. He was an old friend of the Ashton family, was friends with Sarah's father, and as family legends told, honestly and openly tried to win the girl away from his friend. Well, the girl preferred Robert Ashton, became his wife, gave birth to their daughter Sarah, and Arthur, in his own words, remained forever inconsolable in love, lingering before the newlyweds like a perpetual reproach. However, Eleanor always laughed merrily remembering this story. Oh yes, Art, I remember how long and violently you grieved. For 2 days, she would nod. And then you went to the cinema with your Ginny. So don't blab, or people will think we have a love triangle. Despite such details, the trio remained friends throughout their lives, and after burying his suddenly departed friend, Arthur seemed to take responsibility for Eleanor and 10-year-old Sarah. He was very happy when Sarah, finishing school, having outgrown her girlish dreams of a film career, modeling, or sports fame, seriously considered finance as a future profession. That's right, Sarah, the already solid, authoritative, and very wealthy businessman would preach. You go study, and then come work for me. We have such things unfolding now. You know, I need my own people, especially in these financial matters, where the devil himself would get lost. Sarah graduated from university, and of course, came to work for that very holding company, where Arthur James was one of the founders, directors, shareholders. In short, the most important person. Well, everyone will say that you hired me just because I'm an Ashton, the daughter of your friends, she doubted. And why can't I hire you because of that? Arthur was surprised. Especially since you're like a daughter to me, too. Come on, Sarah. Don't bother your head with nonsense. Start working. And if it turns out I was wrong about you, well, I'll fire you, regardless of your last name. That's how we'll fix your reputation. But the old businessman was not mistaken. Sarah turned out to be an excellent financier, and each year of work only added to her experience, foresight, and intuition. After several years, she became the company's chief economist auditor, spending a significant part of her time traveling to numerous enterprises, firms, factories, and combines, assessing the correctness of reporting and the efficiency of production. Sarah Elizabeth, dearie. Arthur always addressed her with this strange phrase when a difficult conversation was ahead. Or rather, you have a little trip coming up. You see, we need to give our little factory in N-Town a thorough check. Things have been going quite badly there. In N-Town? Sarah was surprised. Hasn't it been shut down yet? I thought they were planning to. The profits there are negligible. The costs are enormous. Before making that decision definitively, we need to go, study the situation carefully, estimate how much needs to be invested and if it's worth it. So you go. Arthur suddenly became animated. You know, my good friend David Thompson has been working there as chief engineer for about 10 years. He's quite a guy, and you should take a closer look at him there. What? In what sense? Sarah bristled. In that very sense, the man nodded with a smile. Arthur James, I dare remind you, I'm married. Oh, come on, Sarah. What married? Forgive me, an old fool, for interfering in your affairs. I just can't bear to see you suffer and waste your life on a man who never deserved you. All right, that's enough. I'm sorry. You're a big girl. You'll sort out your own affairs. As for the factory, I repeat again, I will only agree to liquidate it if everything there is completely hopeless. Well, Sarah, you know, it's my hometown. There's not much else for people to work there. I wouldn't want to deprive them of their last resort, and the people there are wonderful. So, inwardly scolding her boss for his unexpected sentimentality, Sarah found herself in a distant place, at an old, dilapidated factory that, from her point of view, was doing so completely unnecessarily. On the very first day of her business trip, she was convinced that all her suspicions were correct. Everything was bad there, very bad, even worse. The equipment was old, the machines rattled like a pile of scrap metal, and the financial reporting was simply horrifying with errors, miscalculations, and outright blunders. Whom Arthur had so admired, speaking of wonderful people she, frankly, did not understand. She met the chief engineer, that very quite a guy, under rather scandalous circumstances, such that she herself was, frankly, a little ashamed to remember the meeting. For a couple of days, she sat in the accounting department, digging through reports, frowning angrily, maintaining a significant and tragic silence, frightening the poor chief accountant with her appearance, and finally said, Okay, well, this is all clear to me. I need to talk to the management of all this. She gestured around an imaginary figure, referring to the factory mess. But Sarah Elizabeth, you know, the director and his deputy will be here tomorrow. The only management member currently at work is Thompson. He's our chief engineer. Suddenly, the lady became animated, as if she felt a surge of energy. It's even better for you to talk to David Michael. You have many questions about the equipment. Yes, very many, Sarah smirked. Where is this chief engineer's office? His office is nearby, the next one down the corridor. But he's not there. He's hardly ever in his office, the chief accountant replied. Do any of your management members actually come to work? You know, for a change? Sarah snapped. Oh no, you misunderstood. He is at work, the woman rattled. He just doesn't sit in his office. He's mostly in the workshops. You can go directly there. They'll show you. But, Sarah Elizabeth, you should change your shoes. It's not very clean in there. It's a production facility after all. It's not just not very clean here, Sarah mimicked the chief accountant, getting up decisively. It's outright dirt everywhere, literally and figuratively. Now where is your unfortunate chief engineer? Sarah shouted irritably, trying to be heard over the noise of the machines and keep her safety helmet from slipping down her nose. She should have listened to that funny, naive woman from accounting and changed her shoes. But now it was too late, and an oily stain of some filth spread across her lovely suede shoe. In frustration, she was ready to immediately grab the throat of this damned chief engineer, because of whom she was trudging through a dirty workshop. "Why unfortunate?" a voice asked from somewhere around her knees. She jumped back in fright. A dirty man in a work uniform, with hands so smeared they looked alien and simply attached to his sleeves, was crawling out from under a stationary line. "Why unfortunate?" he continued in a slightly hoarse voice. "Quite happy with life, actually. And if I manage to catch the hockey game broadcast tonight, I'll be completely happy." Sarah stared at the talking worker in astonishment. No, this wasn't a factory. It was some kind of circus. A big top. "Listen here," she frowned. "I am, of course, impressed by your knowledge of your boss's affairs, but just tell me where he is. Where is this so-called chief engineer of yours?" "Again, you're wrong," the strange worker grumbled. "He's not so-called. He's quite real." "I've had enough," Sarah exploded. "This is absolute madness. Either you tell me immediately where your Thompson is, or I'll—" "No need for anything. I'm here," the dirty one in the work uniform suddenly said. "Excuse the appearance, but allow me to introduce myself. Thompson, David Michael. And why—" She struggled to find words, but quickly regained her composure and almost shouted, "Why are you here and in such a state? Don't you have anything better to do? What is even happening here? Are you a manager or what? How can anyone take you seriously? That's why everything here is in such a state, because you, the chief engineer of the factory, instead of controlling business processes, organizing, coordinating work, are sitting under some piece of metal and tightening nuts." "You see, my dear woman," the man replied sadly, "if I don't immediately tighten this nut on the piece of metal right now, I'm afraid there will be nothing to organize and coordinate, and nothing to manage either. The business process will collapse." But at the same time, she had a clear feeling that he was laughing inside. His eyes gave him away. Large, light gray, shining on that grimy face like two precious stones of very pure and high quality. "And what's this, my dear woman?" she snapped. "I am not your dear, and I am not a woman." "Oh, really?" Thompson was surprised. "Well, I might agree about the first part. It's a bit early to call you dear. But what about the second? What are you, if not a woman?" And again, that obvious, sly, good-natured mockery, and around them, faces smiling at who knows what, instead of working. Probably those same wonderful people, according to Arthur. Sarah closed her eyes and tried to remember something from the numerous training sessions on effective personnel interaction she had attended. But nothing suitable came to mind, so she simply and scandalously burst out, squealing the ends of her words. "That's it, enough. I'm fed up. Remember, my name is Sarah Elizabeth, and I've come for a comprehensive audit of your enterprise. And I have the broadest possible authority, up to and including the complete disbandment of your fly-by-night operation. In 20 minutes, Mr. Thompson, I expect you in the director's office with documentation for all equipment and clear explanations for the inefficient use of the fixed assets and assets entrusted to you." "I can't do it in 20 minutes. Let's make it 40, Thompson said calmly. "Sarah Elizabeth, please don't take it as disrespect for your broadest authority, but I absolutely need to get this fixed asset entrusted to me running, and I need to wash my assets too." To the laughter of the now quite numerous crowd, he extended his dirty hands towards her, hands that shone with ingrained dirt. Sarah suddenly realized that if she wanted to save face, or rather, what was left of it, she had better keep quiet. She snorted, tilted her nose up, sharply turned around, and almost sprawled on the floor because of a broken heel. Oh dear, who runs around a factory in shoes like that? It's not profitable, is it? She heard a quiet, hoarse voice and finally hated its owner. Boor, oaf, lout, she muttered, limping on her uneven heels towards the factory office. Probably became a boss purely by chance, just because there was no one else to appoint in this hole. All he can do is tinker with metal. And yet, a wit. Well, never mind. I'll arrange a satire and humor contest for you. Exactly 40 minutes later, a short, broad-shouldered man entered the director's office, nodded gravely, and sat down at the desk. Sarah noticed out of the corner of her eye his composed movements, excellent suit, neatly combed hair. Well, thank God. At least someone is sane, at least dressed normally, not acting up, Sarah thought, quickly finishing her sentence, raised her head, and stared in astonishment at Thompson himself. You? She raised her eyebrows, trying to pretend his appearance didn't surprise her. Well, that's completely different. It turns out you can look very presentable. I can, he nodded with a sigh. Though it rarely happens. Mostly I have to run around the workshop with a wrench, repairing fixed assets. Exactly. Why are you running around? That's the job of a repair mechanic, an adjuster, or whatever he's called on your staff list. He should be dealing with the equipment. I completely agree with you, Sarah Elizabeth. Only we have a staff list, a beautiful big one. You read it and your soul rejoices. But we don't have repair mechanics. That's the catch. He nodded seriously. Firstly, I'm not Sally. I'm Sarah. Sarah Elizabeth, she articulated. And secondly, why don't you have mechanics? Well, probably for the same reason we don't have turners, millers, general laborers, and many other things. We pay little, so people don't come to us. Serious salaries are paid at enterprises that make a profit. That's a simple truth. And you, as a manager, a leader, should know this and explain it to your subordinates, Sarah said proudly. I know, Sarah Elizabeth, and I completely agree with you. That's what I tell Billy, my last adjuster, every day first thing in the morning. Billy, look, wait, and as soon as the profit starts pouring in, you'll immediately get a serious salary. Thompson looked at her without the slightest hint of a smile. She sighed deeply. A terrible man. Although he looks, of course. Yes, he looks. Wait, what was she thinking about? Stop calling me Sally. I'm Sarah. Right. Let's talk specifically about your affairs. I looked at the reports on equipment maintenance and operating costs. My hair stood on end. What profit can we talk about when, with terrible expenses, the utilization rate of machines and lines is below 40%? Are you completely out of your mind? Can you explain this to me as the chief engineer? I can, he nodded. But for fairness, let's first rename me the chief antiquarian keeper of antiquity, because half of our equipment has long existed only in these papers. He pushed several folders towards her. And what's left? It works, thank God, at the percentages you mentioned, esteemed Sarah Elizabeth, with God's and our help. And yes, you're not Sally, I remember. Listen, Thompson, let's talk seriously, she said after a pause. You understand that given the current state of affairs, it's more profitable for the holding company to close the factory than to invest huge sums in it. Well, yes, of course, it's more profitable. And there's no need to think about the 1,000 people who will be left without work. And do you know that we have 9 dynasties of hereditary factory masters? And that we still make the best quality products with our old junk? There's not much of it, but it's the best. He waved his hand. Okay, wait. Let's say you have excellent masters in production, but the specialists, they're no good. I spent 2 days checking accounting entries and reporting. This Martha Ann of yours, Her knowledge is that of a technical college graduate, and yet she's the chief accountant. And Martha is a technical college graduate, and even if she's lacking something, she's an honest person and works for three, Thompson scowled. You know, Sarah Elizabeth, I've been working here for 10 years, and not once has a city girl in suede shoes come here to work during my time. Maybe then we'd have a great chief accountant. Yes, it's easy for you to say. You were born here. You live here. Probably your whole life. Do you think it's easy to just pick up and move to this backwater? Oh, by the way, I've been meaning to ask you, where did you get your Moscow diploma? She suddenly remembered. By chance, Sarah Elizabeth, just like the position of chief engineer. A pure misunderstanding. He smiled. Stop calling me Sally, Sarah corrected him habitually, more to catch her breath. All right, David Michael. You can go. Thank you. You're welcome, not Sarah Elizabeth, he said, and left. Well, how can you have a normal conversation with a person like that? Oh, what are you saying, Sarah Elizabeth? How is he local? Thompson. He's your fellow countryman, a native Muscovite. The girl from the HR department was terribly flattered by the attention of the Capitol auditor, and especially by the fact that the lady was clearly inquiring about Thompson, confidentially, so to speak. His parents still live there. He goes to visit them on vacation. You know, I don't know all the details and I don't like gossip, but David Michael is, well, just a romantic hero to us. He had some personal tragedy there in Moscow, something terrible. That's why he left and came here. And he lives here, well, just like some kind of monk, imagine, with his looks. Arthur James. Sarah mumbled into the phone, feeling embarrassed. And Thompson, why is he even stuck there? Ah, interested? Did David catch your eye? Arthur suddenly seemed pleased. In what sense? Are you serious? Sarah was indignant. It's just that he's, how can I put it, unusual perhaps. He has… Sarah, his life is in complete ruins. His wife was pregnant and died. That happened a long time ago, many years ago. That's why he's been wandering the world alone ever since. But fortunately, he's been lingering around our factory. Everything there depends on David. Well, I think you figured that out yourself by now. Well, I'll be, she thought then. It turns out this man has a lot of rather grim things behind him, and yet he sometimes acts like a stand-up comedian. And a few days later, perhaps the most terrifying episode of her life occurred. That day she got bogged down with documents and left the factory office when the thick August twilight had already set in. The hotel where Sarah was staying during her business trip was located nearby, a couple of stops away. But it was late, and waiting for a bus seemed questionable. I'll walk, Sarah decided, remembering a shady alley someone at the factory had shown her, which ran through a semi-abandoned park, cutting off a good portion of the route and leading directly to the hotel. After a whole day spent in a dusty office among piles of papers, Sarah inhaled the refreshed evening air with pleasure and strode briskly along the paved path. And suddenly, from the darkness, two figures emerged silently, as if woven from the air. One quickly stepped onto the path in front of Sarah, and the second behind her, cutting off her retreat. All right, the one in front drawled in a low male voice. However, it was already clear they were tall, solid men. In the twilight, from the terror that gripped her entire body, they seemed simply enormous. Well, look at that. What a fairy. And she's not bad at all herself. And such a promising handbag. Yes, Mick, he continued. The one standing behind grumbled something, clearly sharing the admiration for the woman and her handbag. All right, lady, let's do this the nice way. If we agree, nothing will happen to you. Well, what do I mean, nothing? Nothing too bad. A gentleman's word. He laughed. Listen, do you need money? Sarah finally overcame the spasm in her throat. I only have a card, but I'll tell you the code. Here, Please take it. She fumbled with her shaking hands to open her bag. Of course, you'll tell us, absolutely, but that's later. After. The man grinned. She couldn't make out his face completely because of the dark hood pulled low over it, but she saw dark stubble among which teeth gleamed in a terrifying sneer. A real beast, the thought flashed through her mind. In reality, compared to this creature, who was called a human only by mistake, even the hungriest evil wolf in a dark forest would have seemed like a harmless puppy. And of course, she didn't believe his assurances that he supposedly wouldn't do anything too bad to her for a second. I wonder how quickly they'll find me, if they find me at all. And if they do, will there be anything to send to my mother? This is what I get for taking a shortcut, you unfortunate idiot, Sarah suddenly thought, somehow detachedly, almost calmly. Please listen. Don't touch me, she said in a trembling, breaking voice. Oh, madam, I'm a well-mannered man. Did you notice? I don't even use you informally. I continue to address you respectfully as you, he chuckled. I told you, I'm a gentleman. For some reason, after this phrase, Sarah became especially frightened. If they had been simple thugs, dazed by drink and some other filth, there would have been hope of persuading them, bribing them, stalling for time, or finally, simply trying to break free and run away. But before her stood two strong, firmly rooted scoundrels, from whom waves of malice and cruelty emanated. Hear that, gentlemen? She suddenly heard a quiet, firm voice. Get out of the way. Let the person pass. From the terror that paralyzed her, she couldn't even turn around to look at the unexpected fairy tale-like help. Though, it wasn't necessary. The new character in this eerie scene appeared from somewhere to the side, and decisively, ignoring the animated men, moved Sarah behind his back, pushing her to the edge of the alley. Oh, what a lucky day today, right, Mick? The one in the hood grinned. Check out the jacket on this guy. You've wanted one like that for a long time, haven't you? Come on, man. Take off your jacket and get out of here quickly. I have a date with the madam here. Doesn't look like it. The unexpected protector chuckled, whose voice to Sarah, who was slightly emerging from her stupor, seemed familiar. You're without flowers, and the lady isn't throwing herself around your neck. Sarah raised her head and her gaze fixed on the speaker's back. He was strong, but far from being a thug. He was shorter, smaller, and clearly weaker. All right, a rival, huh? The man in the hood bared his teeth like an animal again. And I don't tolerate rivals. I simply eliminate them, literally. He slowly pulled his hand out of his pocket, and a blade glinted brightly in the light in his fist. Well, the evening is ceasing to be romantic, the man standing in front of Sarah muttered. She squeezed her eyes shut in terror, and when she opened them, she blinked in astonishment. Still clutching the knife in his hand, the attacker, met with a move that left him looking amazed, fell to the ground, and lay still. The man stepped on his hand, holding the knife, added a quick, precise blow to the head, and straightened up. It was Thompson. He quickly smiled at the astonished Sarah and turned to the second bandit. You wanted to take my jacket? David grumbled. The guy mumbled something unintelligible and lunged, and a second later, he choked on a gurgle, running into a fist. Thompson's second fist landed on his head, and suddenly, perhaps because of the helpless expression that appeared on his face, he seemed like a boy to Sarah, almost a child. Oh, you'll kill him, Sarah blurted out. Why are you beating him? She asked this almost with indignation, as if only a few minutes ago this very guy hadn't threatened her with a terrible fate. Thompson looked at Sarah in surprise and shook his head, and she, relieved of the danger, hating herself for it, instead of thanking him for saving her, suddenly said in a nasty voice, By the way, brute force isn't always the best argument, and anyway, we need the police. Thompson nodded seriously and took his phone out of his pocket. Station. Who? Captain Peterson? Oh, Pete. Hi. Yeah, it's me. Thompson smiled broadly. Pete, good to hear from you. When did you get back? They said you went to Baikal for fishing. Yeah, I was. Oh, Pete, you're a pig, of course. You could have invited me. All right. So, how was the Omel? You're kidding. What were you using? A jig? Listen, have you tried? David stood there chatting on the phone as if he were sitting in an armchair at home, not standing in the middle of a dark alley with bandits lying 2 steps away, and her, Sarah, trembling and sobbing beside him, apparently having a delayed hysterical fit. Oh, Pete, all right. You'll tell me everything in more detail later. What am I calling about, Comrade Captain? I need you to send a squad. We have 2 citizens resting here, one with a very sharp knife, and a beautiful woman they scared badly. And also, he looked at Sarah ironically and chuckled, I need to be detained and questioned about exceeding the limits of self-defense. Why jokes, Pete? I mean, Comrade Captain? This citizen insists I could have acted a bit more gently. Although, he suddenly leaned down, looking closely at the face of the lying man whose hood had slipped off. Looks like gentleness wouldn't have worked here. I suspect this is Timmy, your old charge. Why is he wandering around free, Pete? Got out again. Oh, wonderful. How happy I am for him. Got out, and apparently went straight to the library. And he brought a knife to carefully cut the stuck pages. You're something, Comrade Captain Pete. He's scaring people, and you're fishing on Baikal. All right, go ahead. Send them. We're waiting on our old alley, right by the former stand with former leading workers of the former production. Can you ever be serious? Sarah asked him when he put his phone in his pocket. Sarah Elizabeth, I am very serious, truly. And now that I've seen who exactly attacked you here, I'm even slightly scared, honestly. If I had known it was Timmy the recidivist, I never would have gotten involved. Well, you understand. Since it happened, please forgive me for beating him up. Don't file a police report against me, okay? Thompson looked down with a guilty, contrite expression. You're a clown, you are, she burst out indignantly. You're ready to turn everything into a circus. I'm tired of repeating it to you. I'm not Sally, I'm Sarah. Sarah, Sarah. Sarah, Sarah, Sally. Sally, dear. Someone gently but noticeably shook her shoulder. Sally, dear, wake up, get up. It's already morning. My, how you slept. It's clear you love traveling by train. Sarah struggled to open her eyes. Edith, Mary, and Carol were sitting opposite her, smiling, as if contemplating a sleepy, crumpled face with hair sticking up is the most pleasant thing imaginable. Morning? Sarah was astonished. Did I sleep all night? And how? The old woman laughed. It was a pleasure to watch and listen. Sarah looked at her reflection in a small mirror in astonishment. Well, I'll be. I just lay down to think about life. She didn't remember when the memories turned into a sound and unprecedentedly long sleep. Sally, dear, why did we decide to wake you? Don't be angry, dearie, but we're having a guest soon. Edith Mary smiled. So you should wash up and comb your hair, and we'll have breakfast. A guest? Sarah was surprised, and suddenly noticed that both her compartment neighbors were dressed in nice tracksuits, had clearly styled their hair as much as travel conditions allowed, and had even, good heavens, put on lipstick. Yes, Davy dear. I mean David Michael, Edith said. Well, not exactly a guest, actually. He's coming to fix the lock for us, because our compartment door is stuck. Carol and I could barely get out this morning. We don't have such a heroic sleep as you do, Sally dear. Edith laughed softly. Fix the door. David, Sarah said, bewildered, and didn't even immediately realize that for the first time, his name didn't cause her irritation, but joy. She listened to herself in astonishment and asked, And who gave him permission to fix anything here anyway? Oh, Sally dear, David has golden hands. He's already fixed half the breakdowns in the carriage. He fixed the hot water dispenser, several outlets. The conductor can't breathe enough of him. She even gave him a little bottle of tincture. And he told us he'd finish his business and come to us with that bottle. So you, Sally dear, should also dress up a bit, because he's so— And Edith smiled lyrically and shyly. Thompson came, and not alone, but with his neighbor, the very intellectual-looking man who had boarded with the Crossword magazine. "Well, David," the man said, holding the compartment door, "how skillfully you do everything. It's simply amazing. Truly a master. And I, frankly, at first thought you were some kind of scientist. You won't believe it," he turned to the ladies. "I considered myself an experienced crossword solver, but compared to David, I'm nothing. He just knows everything. For example, do any of you know which admiral sank the Turkish fleet at the Battle of Chesma? And which classic of Russian literature discovered 20 new species of butterflies? And what is the unit of measurement for odor intensity? No? Well, neither do I, or I don't remember. But he knows. All the answers to all the questions." The man laughed. "Just some kind of magician." "Oh, come on, George William," David chuckled, checking the repaired lock. "Well, I know a few things. Some things you can just think about and guess, even if you don't know." "For example?" the others present asked eagerly. "Well, for example, this question. Which living creature has its brain located furthest from its heart?" Okay. Interesting. And who is it?" Edith, Mary, and Carol exclaimed, clasping their hands. "Well, think about it. Estimate the distance. Try to figure it out. There's something to keep you busy. It'll last you half the journey." David smiled. "But how, Davy dear? David Michael. We'll never guess." "No, you must tell us." The women became agitated. "We'll just torture ourselves. Please tell us." "A giraffe," Sarah suddenly said quietly. "A giraffe's brain is furthest from its heart." David looked at her and nodded silently, almost imperceptibly. And the minutes, the hours, flew by so fast that she didn't even notice how the journey, which had seemed unbearable and endless, had come to an end. And now she waited with dread for the train's last stop, the last look at him, the last touch of that strong but gentle hand, with traces of machine oil forever ingrained in the skin. After saying goodbye to everyone, David suddenly turned, walked quickly to her, and slipped a piece of paper into her hands. "Sarah Elizabeth, Sarah, Sally, perhaps we will never see each other again, but just promise me one thing. If you need help, if you need me, just call me. I'll do anything for you." He looked at her attentively, honestly and desperately, and she saw recognition in those eyes, his recognition, for which words were not needed. David picked up his bag and quickly strode towards the carriage exit. "Oh, Sally dear, forgive me, of course," she heard Edith Mary's voice. "We certainly will never see each other again. And this is what I'll tell you, dear. You, Sally dear, are a silly girl, that is, forgive me again, just a fool. He loves you, and you love him. Even a half-blind old woman like me can see that. Oh, Sarah, well, the giraffe is alive." When Arthur spoke of her worthless family life before Sarah's business trip, he himself didn't suspect how close he was to the truth. It had been gone for a long time. That life, family, and nothing at all. She and Thomas had lived together for almost 8 years and never understood why they had spent those years together. And it had never been so hard to return to her apartment as it was after those weeks at the factory and 2 amazing days on the train. "Sarah, I've filed for divorce," she heard from Thomas as soon as she crossed the threshold. "Sarah, I know you'll be unhappy. It's all a bit sudden, undignified somehow. I don't know, she interrupted, feeling incredible relief. "But I think this is the only time you've done the right thing. Thank you. I've never been so grateful to you in all these years." Sarah grabbed her astonished and frightened husband, or rather, ex-husband, by the hand and shook it. She fled the apartment, despite all of Thomas's attempts to explain something about court, property division, apartment documents, some other nonsense that was completely unnecessary to her now. She wanted only one thing: to dial the number written on the piece of paper and hear his voice say her name, slightly twisting it in his simple way to Sally. And he answered so quickly that the first ring hadn't even faded, as if he had been waiting for her call constantly. They sat on a comfortable bench under an old maple tree, which was already noticeably highlighted with autumn colors. "You know, Davy," she said, feeling his warmth, tenderness, and strength, feeling it with every cell of her body and melting with such simple and easy happiness. "It's amazing, because back then, well, when we ended up on the same train, at first it seemed to me that I just hated you, right? And now, just a few days later, I don't understand how I could have lived without you for so many years. It's unthinkable." "Well, what's so incomprehensible and amazing about that, Sarah?" He chuckled, pulling her closer. "You know the saying, from love to hate is one step? And who said the path from hate to love is longer?"